Today's episode is sponsored by Rev, the productivity powerhouse for content creators, journalists, market researchers, and more. Capture audio from anywhere, get AI-powered summaries and quotes, and leave security worries behind with Rev. Whether you're on the go or in the office, Rev's got you covered. Discover more at rev.com. Hi, I'm Kendall Kelton, and I'm your host today on The Rough Draft. Featuring honest conversations with folks from across the creative industry, The Rough Draft explores the creative process, tools, and resources used by some of the best in the business. From journalists to content creators and business leaders, we shed light on what it looks like to break into the industry, make mistakes, collaborate with others, and the essential tools that help us all along the way. This week, I'm super excited to be talking with Sky Dylan-Robbins, an award-winning nonfiction video producer and filmmaker, not to mention media entrepreneur. Sky has worked for ABC News and The New Yorker. She's also the founder and executive director of the Video Consortium, a global nonprofit media organization that connects and supports today's nonfiction filmmakers and video journalists to tell bold stories that change the world. Today's episode, Sky breaks down her creative process and the tools she relies on the most to bring her stories to life. I want to dive into your creative process. So how do you, and this might be a loaded question, but how do you approach bringing your ideas to life?
Great question. Well, I spent the first decade of my career making stuff and actually like producing, telling stories, so to speak. And now I've transitioned more within the context of the Video Consortium into infrastructure building. And so not exactly telling actual stories, but, orchestrating organizational development, so to speak, right? So within both, I would say that organization has been like a key thing in both realms. To-do lists are like my number one. I can get really overwhelmed up here. And as long as I like have a pen and like paper and I write down bullet points of what I need to do and can check things off a list, I feel like that's my biggest tool.
When we're doing the prep for this, you had also mentioned that exercise and meditation are important parts of your creative routine. So I think everybody has that thing, right? Like I love to go for walks. It helps like break up kind of the monotony of the day and helps kind of clear things up in my head. But how do you think those habits have influenced your like productivity or creativity, so to speak?
Yeah, no, everyone has their flow, right? And their prep, like their pre-gaming situation. And I think mine I've gotten into a cadence of needing to have like inner cleansing and outer cleansing, so to speak, every morning. So, it's like we so often focus on the external, but like, going to the gym is great. But like, if you don't go to the gym in your mind, then you're screwed. That's
fair. Like if you're thinking about the rest of your day, are you actually like focused in on like everything else? That's a good
Exactly.
point.
And like being in the moment, right? Vigorous exercise to sweat out the day before and meditation and a lot of coffee. Or like if I don't do those three things in the morning, then the rest of my day is kind of off. What about you? What's your thing?
I have a 4.5-year-old and he is an early riser. And like once he's up, he is like, we're partying. We're out. So like it's going to sound a little wild, but if I don't wake up early and have like just an hour, it could be just like walking our dog or maybe it's working out. But if I don't have like that hour before, it really shoots the rest of my day. Cause like I get up and all of a sudden like you're expelling energy with your kid, or it could be a pet too, whoever you are. And then you transition into work and then you get home and then it's back to the kid. And then it's like, then you got to go to sleep. So I have to have that like morning, whatever that is, just to like have my moment.
Amen. I love that.
Well, but I also think something you brought up about pen and paper, it's so interesting because we have so many tools at our disposal, right? We have phones that can record things for you. You like the rise of AI and ChatGPT and all these other things. But there is still something very special about just those instrumental physical tools like a pen and a paper. And I wanted to know, like, how are you balancing these like influx of the new things coming out especially as you are more in that like operational mindset and probably thinking through ways in which your community can work more efficiently. Like, how do you balance like all of the new things coming out with those, like, but at the end of the day, like, we're all humans and we don't want to lose sight on it. And
those fundamental aspects of like the core things that bring you back to, am I doing this effectively? Like pen and paper. And one can't discount the idea of having a team of people that you work with and that you trust. I'm a big believer in always trying to surround myself by people who are smarter than me. I'm working really hard as VC grows to learn how to delegate better or like pass things off and like then step back. That's been a really big thing. But every now and then getting back to the present and thinking about what are the buckets of things and trying to organize things in my mind instead of having this like tornado going on all the time, and segmenting how to do things. It's segmenting like blocks of time to do things in. And then just trusting your colleagues those are all like big things.
So then for someone who may be just starting out in nonfiction video, what advice do you have for them, especially considering, we talked previously about challenges and the speed at which people are moving and, if they need to potentially pursue independent or local or, not everyone's going to all of a sudden get a gig at the New York Times overnight, right? So what is your biggest advice for them in terms of starting out their career?
This is in terms of producing content.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I mean, everything's changing so much, right? The fundamentals, though, of being the kind of person that people want to work with and then having great work, I think like those two things are fundamental. Networking is such a terrible word, but knowing that community is important, that connections are really important, and making sure that you follow up with people all the time and send a thank you note and be curious. Don't just like talk at people. Like listen, whether it's an interview or otherwise, and not feel like you're in a networking situation. Be having that social, emotional awareness to just not be like, oh my gosh, I see that person. I want to make a connection with them so that I can get a job. It's like, let me hear where they are and have this be like a really good exchange and let them know that I'm a good listener. I feel like those are really fundamental. And then just in terms of letting the work speak for itself, like practicing, whether you have access to a camera or not, if you want to go down the producing route, getting advice, being open to critique, always trying to improve your work and experiment with new things, especially as the industry changes.
But it sounds like it's the big takeaways for me and what you just said were be curious.
Yeah.
Like take a moment to listen before just bombarding with questions that may come across as self-serving. So it's like, listen, curious, or curiosity and community. Don't doubt like the power of many. Don't think you always have to do things on your own.
Totally. And I will say, and it changes for everyone, but almost all of my jobs have come through personal connections or me applying for something and then saying, hey, can you write a letter of recommendation for me? Because I know you know this person who knows this person. Yeah. And that's always a really powerful thing to do no matter where you are, because people trust the people who they know.
Yeah. I know it's saying it's harder than it sounds, but the difference between like where I was in my career almost 20 years ago and now, like there's things like LinkedIn. Like it's very easy to find out if you have a connection somewhere.
Totally.
At least easier. Now there's intimidation that comes with the actual outreach, but I have to imagine that's one of the biggest benefits of someone joining something like the VC. And do you have students or early career folks that make like that you've seen become a valuable kind of part of your community in a way?
Yeah. Yes. We opened the membership up to students and more emerging professionals like a year and a half ago, so to speak. And it's been really beautiful to see students making connections with our professional members and having those relationships last. I mean, the ethos of VC is like, pick someone up and pull them up, and every generation should do that. And so yes, that's been great to see.
So in the next episode, we're actually going to hear more about how you made your first, was it your first feature film?
Yes, probably the only one. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about it a bit more, but it was a very powerful documentary called On Our Own Island. So we'll talk more about that next. Well, that's it for today's episode of The Rough Draft. Be sure to rate and subscribe in order to stay up to date with the latest episodes, and visit rev.com/podcasts for even more content. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of The Rough Draft.